Since you have seen the forms of imperfect and perfect good, I think it is now time to show where this perfection of happiness resides. First, we must ask whether a good of the kind you defined a short while ago can exist at all, so that we may not be deceived by an empty shadow of thought and thus be prevented from reaching the truth of our problem. Now, no one can deny that something exists, which is a kind of fountain of all goodness, for everything which is found to be imperfect shows its imperfection by the lack of some perfection. It follows that if something is found to be imperfect in its kind, there must necessarily be something of that same kind which is perfect. For without a standard of perfection, we cannot judge anything to be imperfect. Nature did not have its origins in the defective and incomplete, but in the integral and absolute. It fell from such beginnings to its present meanness and weakness. But if, as I have just pointed out, there is a certain imperfect happiness in transitory goods, no one can doubt that there is a perfect and enduring happiness. That is firmly and truly established, I said. Now consider where this perfect happiness has its dwelling place. It is the common conception of the human mind that God, the ruler of all things, is good. For since nothing can be thought of better than God, who can doubt that He is the good, other than whom nothing is better? And that God is good is demonstrated by reason in such a way as to convince us that He is the perfect good. If He were not, He could not be the ruler of all things, for there would be something better than He, something possessing perfect good, which would seem to be older and greater than He. For all perfect things have been shown to come before less perfect ones. And so, if we are to avoid progression ad infinitum, we must agree that the Most High God is full of the highest and most perfect good. But we have already established that perfect good is true happiness. Therefore, it follows that true happiness has its dwelling in the Most High God. I agree, I said. Your argument cannot be contradicted. But observe, philosophy continued, how you may prove scrupulously and inviolably what I have just said, namely, that the Most High God is full of the highest good. How, I asked? By avoiding the notion that the Father of all things has received from other things the highest good with which He is filled, or that He has it naturally in such a way that He and the happiness which He has might be said to differ in essence. For if you should suppose that He receives it from someone else, you could think that the one who gives it is the greater than the one who receives it. But we worthily confessed that God is the most excellent of all beings. And if He has this happiness by nature, but differs from it, then someone else who can will have to explain how these diverse things are joined together, since we are speaking of God, the creator of all things. Finally, that which is different from anything cannot be the thing from which it differs. Therefore, that which according to its nature differs from the highest good cannot be the highest good. But it is blasphemous to think about the one other than whom, as we know, nothing is greater. And surely there can be nothing better by nature than its source. Therefore, I may conclude with certainty that whatever is the source of all things must be, in its substance, the highest good. I agree. And do you also agree that the highest good is happiness? Yes. Then, said philosophy, you must agree that God is happiness. I found your earlier arguments unassailable, and I see that your conclusion follows from them. Then consider whether the same conclusion is not even more firmly established by this, that there cannot exist two highest goods which differ from one another. Clearly, when two goods differ, one cannot be the other. Therefore, neither can be perfect since it lacks the other. But that which is not perfect certainly cannot be the highest good. Therefore, those things which are the highest good cannot be diverse. But I have proved that happiness and God are the highest good. Therefore, that must be the highest happiness, which is the highest divinity. I can think of nothing truer or more reasonable or worthier of God, I said. From this conclusion, then, I will give you a kind of corollary. Just as the geometricians infer from their demonstrated proposition things which they call deductions. Since men become happy by acquiring happiness, and since happiness is divinity itself, it follows that men become happy by acquiring divinity. For as men become just by acquiring integrity and wise by acquiring wisdom, so they must in a similar way become gods by acquiring divinity. Thus everyone who is happy is a god, and although it is true that God is one by nature, still there may be many gods by participation. That is a beautiful and precious idea, I said, whether you call it a corollary or a deduction. And there is nothing more beautiful, philosophy went on, than the truth which reason persuades us to add to this. What is that? I asked. Since happiness seems composed of many things, would you say that these are all joined together in happiness as a variety of parts in one body? Or does one of the parts constitute the essence of happiness with all the rest complementing it? I wish you would explain this point by recalling what is involved. Philosophy then continued, do we not agree that happiness is good? Indeed, it is the highest good, I replied. Then we must add this good to all others. For happiness is considered the fullest sufficiency, the greatest power, honor, fame, and pleasure. Now, are all these to be regarded as good in the sense that they are members of parts of happiness? Or are they simply related to the good as their own crown? I understand the problem now and am eager to have your answer. Here, then, is the solution. If all these goods were constituent parts of happiness, each would differ from the others. For it is the nature of parts to be different things constituting one body. But I have proved that all these things are one and the same thing, therefore they cannot be parts. Otherwise, happiness would seem to be constituted of one part, which is a contradiction in terms. There is no doubt about that, I said. But you have not yet given me the solution. Clearly, all the rest must be related to the good, for riches are sought because they are thought good, power because it is believed to be good, and the same is true of honor, fame, and pleasure. Therefore, the good is the cause and sum of all that is sought for if a thing has in it neither the substance nor appearance of good, it is not sought or desired by men. On the other hand, things which are not truly good but only seem to be are sought after as if they were good. It follows then that goodness is rightly considered the sum, pivot, and cause of all that men desire. The most important object of desire is that for the sake of which something else is sought as a means. As, for example, if a person wishes to ride horseback in order to improve his health, he desires the effect of health more than the exercise of riding. Since, therefore, all things are sought on account of the good, it is the good itself, not the other things, which is desired by everyone. But, as we agreed earlier, all those other things are sought for the sake of happiness. Therefore, happiness alone is the object of men's desires. It follows clearly from this that the good and happiness are one and the same thing. I cannot see how anyone could disagree. But we have also proved that God and true happiness are one and the same. That is so. We can therefore safely conclude that the essence of God is to be found in the good, and nowhere else. Poem 10. Come, all you who are trapped and bound by the foul chains of that deceiving lust which occupies earthbound souls. Here you will find rest from your labors, a haven of steady quiet, a refuge from misery. Nothing that the river Tagus with its golden shores can give, nor the Hermus with its jeweled banks, the Indus of the torrid zone gleaming with green and white stones, none of these can clear man's vision. Instead, they hide blind souls in their shadows. Whatever pleases and excites your mind here, earth has prepared in her deep caves. The shining light which rules and animates the heavens avoids the dark ruins of the soul. Whoever can see this light will discount even the bright rays of Phoebus. Prose 11. I must agree, since your entire argument is established by sound reasons. Then philosophy continued, how highly would you value it if you could know what the absolute good is? Such knowledge would be of infinite value, I said, if I were also able to know God, who is the absolute good. Well, I will show you this with certainty if the conclusions we have arrived at so far are correct. They are indeed, I said. I have already proved that the things which most people want are not the true and perfect good, since they differ from one another. And since one or the other is always missing, they cannot provide full and perfect good. But I have also shown that they become the true good when they are gathered together as if into a single form and operation, so that sufficiency becomes the same as power, honor, fame, and pleasure. And I have further shown that unless they are all one and the same, there is no reason to consider them desirable. You have proved this beyond doubt. Therefore, if these partial goods cannot be truly good if they are different, but are good if they become one, then clearly they become good by acquiring unity. That seems to be true, I said. But if you also grant that every good is good by participating in the perfect good, then you should concede by a similar line of reasoning that the good and the one are the same, for things are of the same essence if their effects are of the same nature. I cannot deny that. And do you also understand that everything that is remains and subsists in being as long as it is one, but that when it ceases to be one, it dies and corrupts? How is this? In the case of animals, when body and spirit are joined together in one being and remain so, that being is called a living thing. But when this unity is dissolved by the separation of body and soul, the being dies and is no longer a living animal. Even the body seems to be human as long as it remains one form in the union of its members. But if this unity is broken by the separation and scattering of the body's members, it ceases to be what it was before. If we go on to examine other things, we will see that each has its being as long as it is one. But when it begins to lose the oneness, it dies. On further consideration, I see that it is so. Is there anything then which acting naturally gives up its desire to live and chooses to die and decay? When I consider animals whose natures give them some choice, I know of none which gives up the will to live and of its own accord seeks death as long as it is free of external pressures. For every living being acts to preserve its life and to avoid death and injury, but about plants and trees and inanimate objects, I simply do not know. You should not be in doubt about them, since you observe the trees and plants take root in suitable places and, to some extent made possible by their natures, do not wither and die. Some grow in the fields, some in the mountains, some in marshland, some in rocky places. Some flourish in sterile sands, but if any of these should be transplanted to some other place, they would die. Nature gives all things what they need and takes care that they live as long as they can. Why do all plants get their nourishment from roots, like a mouth drinking from the ground, and build up rugged bark over the pith? Why is the soft substance on the inside, while on the outside is the firm wood, and covering all is the bark, a rugged defender against harm, protecting the plant against thorns? Note, too, how diligent nature is in propagating every species by multiplying the seed. Everyone knows that these natural processes are designed for the permanent preservation of the species, as well as for the present life of individual plants. Even things believed to be inanimate do what is proper to their natures in much the same way. Why does lightness cause flames to rise and weight cause earth to settle, if not that these phenomena are appropriate to the things concerned? In addition, each thing is kept in being by that which is naturally proper to it, just as each thing is corrupted by that which is naturally opposed to it. Hard things such as stones resist fragmentation by the tough cohesion of their parts, but fluid things such as air and water are easily parted, but then quickly flow together again. Fire, however, cannot be cut at all. We are not concerned here with the voluntary motions of the intelligent soul, but only of the natural operations of which we are unconscious, such as, for example, digestion of food and breathing during sleep. Indeed, even in living things, the desire to live comes not from the wishes of the will, but from the principles of nature. For often the will is driven by powerful causes to seek death, though nature draws back from it. On the other hand, the work of generation, by which alone the continuation of mortal things is achieved, is sometimes restrained by the will, even though nature always desires it. Thus, this love for the self clearly comes from the natural instinct and not from voluntary activity. Providence gave to his creatures this great urge for survival so that they would desire to live as long as they naturally could. Therefore, you cannot possibly doubt that everything which exists naturally desires to continue in existence and to avoid harm. I now see clearly, I said, what up to now seemed uncertain. Furthermore, philosophy went on, whatever seeks to exist and endure also desires to be one, for without unity, existence itself cannot be sustained. That is true, I said. Then all things desire unity. I agreed. But I have already shown that unity is the same as goodness. True, I said. Therefore, all things desire the good, so that we can define the good as that which is desired by all. That is perfectly correct, I agreed. For either there is no one thing to which all other things are related, and therefore they wander without direction or goal, or if there is something toward which all things hasten, it is the highest of all goods. I am greatly pleased with you, my pupil, for you have found the key to truth, and you also see clearly what a while ago you said you did not understand. What is that? I asked. The end or goal of all things. For surely it is that which is desired by all, and since we have identified that as the good, we must conclude that the good is the end toward which all things tend. Poem 11. The man who searches deeply for the truth and wishes to avoid being deceived by false leads must turn the light of his inner vision upon himself. He must guide his soaring thoughts back again and teach his spirit that it possesses hidden among its own treasures whatever it seeks outside itself. Then all that was hidden by the dark cloud of error will shine more clearly than Phoebus, for the body, with its burden of forgetfulness, cannot drive all light from his mind. The seed of truth grows deep within and is roused to life by the breath of learning. For how can you answer questions truly unless the spark of truth glows deep in your heart? If Plato's muse speaks truly, whatever is learned is a recollection of something forgotten. Prose 12. I agree fully with Plato, I said. For this is the second time I have been reminded of these truths. I forgot them, first under the oppressive influence of my body, then later when I was depressed by grief. Philosophy replied, if you consider carefully the conclusions you have granted so far, you will quickly remember something else which you said a while ago that you did not know. The way the world is governed, she said. I do remember confessing my ignorance about that, I answered. And even though I can now anticipate your answer, I want to hear it from you plainly. Earlier in our discussion, Philosophy said, you affirmed without any doubt that the world is ruled by God. I still have no doubt about that and never will, for these reasons. This world could never have achieved its unity of form from such different and contrary parts unless there were one who could bring it together. This world could never have achieved its unity of form from such different and contrary parts unless there were one who could bring together such diverse things. And once this union was effected, the very diversity of discordant and opposed natures would have ripped it apart and destroyed it, if there were not one who could sustain what he had made. Nor could the stable order of nature continue, nor its motions be so regular in place, time, causality, space, and quality, unless there were one who could govern this variety of change while remaining immutable himself. This power, whatever it might be, by which created things are sustained and kept in motion, I call by the name which all men use, God. Philosophy answered, since this is your conviction, I think it will be easy to restore your happiness and bring you back safely to your country. Now, let us return to our task. Have we not already shown that sufficiency is among the attributes of happiness? And are we not agreed that God is absolute happiness? That is right, I said. Then he needs no outside help in ruling the world. Otherwise, if he were in need of anything, he would not be completely self-sufficient. That is necessarily true, I said. Therefore, he disposes all things by himself alone. I agree. Moreover, I have proved that God is absolute good. Then if he, whom we have agreed to be the good, rules all things by himself, he must dispose everything according to the good. He is, in a manner of speaking, the wheel and rudder by which the vessel of the world is kept stable and undamaged. I fully agree, I said, and I saw in advance, though somewhat vaguely, that this is what you would say. I don't doubt it, Philosophy replied, for I think that you are now looking more sharply for the truth. But what I am now going to tell you is equally clear. Since God is rightly believed to govern all things with the rudder of goodness, and since all these things naturally move toward the good, as I said earlier, can you doubt that they will willingly accept his rule and submit freely to his pleasure as subjects who are agreeable and obedient to their leader? This must be so, I answered. For no rule could be called happy if it were a bondage of willing slaves rather than one designed for the welfare of compliant citizens. Then there is nothing which, by following nature, strives to oppose God? Nothing, I agreed. And if anything should try to oppose God, could it be at all successful against the one we have rightly shown to be the one supreme power of happiness? It would have no chance whatever, I said. Then there is nothing which has either the desire or the power to oppose the highest good? Then it is the supreme good which rules all things firmly and disposes all sweetly. I am delighted, I said. Not only by your powerful argument and its conclusion, but even more by the words you have used. And I am at last ashamed of the folly that has so profoundly depressed me. You have read in the fables of the poets how giants made war on heaven, but this benign power overthrew them as they deserved. But now let us set our arguments against each other, and perhaps from their opposition some special truth will emerge. No one can doubt that God is almighty, Philosophy began. Certainly not, unless he is mad, I answered. But nothing is impossible for one who is almighty. Then God can do evil. No, of course not. Then evil is nothing, since God, who can do all things, cannot do evil. You are playing with me, I said, by weaving a labyrinthine argument from which I cannot escape. You seem to begin where you ended and to end where you begin. Are you perhaps making a marvelous circle of the divine simplicity? A little while ago, you began with happiness, declared it to be the highest good, and located its dwelling in Almighty God. You said that God himself is the highest good and perfect happiness. From this, you inferred that no one could be happy unless he too were a God. Then you went on to say that the very form of the good is the essence of God and of happiness, and you said further that unity is identical with the good, which is sought by everything in nature. You also affirmed that God rules the universe by the exercise of his goodness, that all things willingly obey him, and that there is no evil in nature. And you proved all this without outside assumptions, and used only internal proofs which draw their force from one another. Philosophy answered, I have not mocked you at all. With the help of God, whose aid we invoked, we have reached the most important point of all. For it is the nature of the divine essence neither to pass to things outside itself, nor to take any external thing to itself. As Parmenides puts it, the divine essence is embodied like a sphere, perfectly rounded on all sides. It rotates the moving orb of the universe while it remains unmoved itself. You ought not to be surprised that I have sought no outside proofs, but have only used those within the scope of our subject, since you have learned, on Plato's authority, that the language we use ought to be related to the subject of our discourse. Poem 12. Happy is he who can look into the shining spring of good. Happy is he who can break the heavy chains of earth. Long ago the Thracian poet Orpheus mourned for his dead wife. With his sorrowful music he made the woodland dance and the river stand still. He made the fearful deer lie down bravely with the fierce lions. The rabbit no longer feared the dog, quiet by his song. But as the sorrow within his breast burned more fiercely, the music which calmed all nature could not console its maker. Finding the gods unbending, he went to the regions of hell. There he sang sweet songs to the music of his harp, songs drawn from the noble fountains of his goddess mother, songs inspired by the powerless grief and the love which doubled his grief. Hell is moved with pity when, with his melodious prayer, he begs the favor of those shades. The three-headed guardian of the gate is paralyzed by that new song, and the Furies, avengers of crimes who torture guilty souls with fear, are touched and weep in pity. Ixion's head is not tormented by the swift wheel, and Tantalus, long maddened by his thirst, ignores the waters he now might drink. The vulture is filled by the melody and ignores the liver of Titius. At last the judges of souls, moved by pity, declares, "We are conquered." We return to this man, his wife, his companion, purchased by his song. But our gift is bound by the condition that he must not look back until he has left hell. But who can give lovers a law? Love is a stronger law unto itself. As they approached the edge of night, Orpheus looked back at Eurydice, lost her, and died. Loses all excellence he has gained. This fable applies to all of you who seek to raise your minds to sovereign day. For whoever is conquered and turns his eyes to the pit of hell, looking into the inferno, loses all the excellence he has gained.